Hey, welcome back to my Astromech channel. Today I want to show you how my legs came together for my R6 droid. I chose to go with Baltic birch plywood, which is a pretty common method in the builders group. I need to give credit to many of the longtime members of the R2 builders group for their work on this method over the years and for sharing their findings. Basically, there are multiple layers of plywood glued up to give the final thickness needed for the leg. When I first started building these legs, I'd not yet finished putting together my CNC machine, so these are laid out and cut by hand. Since finishing the CNC, I've cut out a second set of legs, but we won't be talking about those today. I will say though that I thought that the machine cut legs would be way more accurate than the hand cut legs, but in truth this is really not the case, and makers who don't have access to a CNC shouldn't think twice about doing it by hand. I originally thought that having a rigid template would simplify cutting out all those pieces of plywood. I cut the template out of acrylic, and the idea was that I'd rough cut the plywood and then finish the cuts using the template and a flush cut bit on my router table. Once I had the template in hand, I got to work cutting my birch plywood to size and transferring the leg profiles to the wood. I started cutting the pieces on my bandsaw, and I realized pretty quickly that I was getting great results by just taking my time and cutting to the line. I could just skip the whole template to router table ordeal altogether. To get the final dimensions of the leg right, we start with 2 sizes of plywood and stack 5 separate pieces in a particular order. I bought Baltic birch plywood in 18mm and 12mm thicknesses. The center layer of the leg is cut from the 18mm and the rest is cut from the 12. I took one of the ankle pieces down an extra 2mm to get it down to the dimensions on the club blueprints. One tricky part of this method is the hollow below the shoulders where the stabilizers are. This pocket needs to be cut out before the layers are laminated. The center layer is easy and it's cut out completely, but the outer layers need to be cut only partway through to create the final pocket. And to do this, I transferred the profile to the 12mm plywood and cut the pocket by hand with my router. Another thing worth mentioning is the slot that's removed from the 18mm center layer. This will provide a conduit for wires which will eventually need to run to the feet. Once I had all the pieces cut, I got to gluing and clamping. And to do this, I had to use just about every clamp in my shop. While this glue was setting up, I cut the plywood discs that I would be using to build the shoulder flanges, which go between the legs and the frame. I figured these needed to be 30mm thick, so I cut 2 discs from the 12mm plywood and 2 from the 18mm, which would be laminated together. I printed out a template to transfer the positions for the mounting bolts, then drilled pilot holes through the legs. These holes were then transferred through to the shoulder hubs. The legs will be secured to a simple frame using a series of 1/4-inch bolts. I cut countersinks for the bolt heads before drilling the holes out to the final 1/4-inch bore. At this point, I had the basic form of my legs complete. Although I didn't show it here, the center ankle was constructed in the same way and will be shown in a later video. At this point, I concentrated on finishing the frame that I needed to mount the legs and the body. I'll detail this in my next video. As always, if you enjoyed watching this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Now I need to get back to work, so until next time, stay safe and have fun.